Smartphones are loaded with features, some are completely useless and some are pure genius. And today we'll talk about some of the features that actually make a difference in your life. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where you wake up and your phone is still on 20% because last night you didn't plug it into the brick?
Yep, that's me. You're probably wondering how I ended up in this situation.
This is why you need fast charging. It will save you from these situations. And straight away, people have fears that fast charging will damage your battery, because surely pumping 100 watts into the battery makes it go. But in reality, not really, because fast chargers have layers of protection, temperature sensors, and voltage regulators and all that fluff. And this is so that the phone just doesn't overheat. Or maybe fast charging means that the phone battery will be smaller, right? That's also not true, because OnePlus 12 has 100 watt charging and a 2-day battery. It has 1600 cycles, which is like 4 years of daily charging before your battery goes from an S tier all the way down to an A+ tier. Are you really gonna notice that? Fast charging basically has no downsides. And when companies like Samsung and Apple still use 25 watts and 45 watts, it's one of the main reasons why I wouldn't get those phones. For example, an iPhone 16 Pro Max takes over 2 hours to charge fully from 0 to 100%, whereas the OnePlus 12 takes just 26 minutes. That is a massive difference. Now this feature takes photography to a whole new level. Do you remember when low light photos used to look like this? And the only way to fix it was to use a flash? Yep, that's before the night mode was invented. You see, when you take a photo in a dim environment, your phone's tiny sensor doesn't have enough light to capture the information, so you're left with either a super grainy or a super blurry image. This is where Google steps up with the Pixel 3 and introduces a night sight feature. It essentially works by using a longer exposure, which allows the sensor to gather more light. It has multiple exposures, which means it can combine the best parts of each image. It reduces the motion blur, reduces the grain, and fixes the colors. This feature was so good that companies like Samsung, Apple, and Huawei made their own versions of the night mode and competed to have the best implementation. And today almost every phone has this feature, and it's just so easy to use. You just point your camera at something that's poorly lit, and then you get an icon that implies that the night mode is going to kick in, and then you just take the picture. The only downside is having to wait like an extra second or two, but it's definitely worth it. But there's another feature that completely changes how you use your device. One that you haven't even realized is impacting your experience in subtle yet powerful ways. Most people think it's just for one thing, but the truth is, it changes everything. Let's take an average phone, say the iPhone 16. It has a 60Hz screen, which means it refreshes once every 60 seconds. It sounds pretty smooth, but the thing is it as smooth as you think? Now take a phone like a Samsung Galaxy S24. Instead of 60 times, it refreshes 120 times a second. It's like flipping through twice as many pages at the same time. You might not notice it at first, but with every swipe, with every scroll, it just feels so much faster because there's less delay between your interactions and the animations. And here's what's crazy, most people are perfectly happy with 60Hz because they don't know what they're missing out. At first they see a 120Hz screen and think, this looks kind of the same, but it's only when you go back to 60Hz, everything feels much slower and more delayed. And it's only after you had 120Hz for a while, you realize how game-changing it is. Once you experience it, there's no turning back. Most people think that zoom cameras are just there so you can pointlessly zoom into buildings or take pictures of the moon. The moon looks literally the same for everyone, so why do we keep taking the exact same picture? But what if I told you that zooming can be way more useful than that? Yet again, if you take an average phone such as an iPhone 16, that phone doesn't have a zoom lens, which means that if you pinch out to zoom in, you're stretching the image, so you do get closer, but you're losing a bunch of detail. Now this is where it gets interesting. Something like a OnePlus 12 has a 3x optical zoom lens, which means that if you zoom in past 3x, it switches to that dedicated lens and it acts like a telescope because it's not losing any detail since all the work is being done by the lens. This lens can be used when, for example, you're in the back of the class and you need to take notes from like 3 miles away. This can also read signs from afar away. So let's just say you're in the airport and you're too lazy to stand up and check the screen. You can just zoom in and check your flight. I also found it very useful to scan QR codes from afar. However, not all features are this cool. And if you want to see some features that are just a waste of space, you can watch my other video about some of the most pointless features in a smartphone.